All right, we're gonna roll right in here to Jim Gerrish's presentation, and
All righty. As I forewarned you, this talk was going to be about number crunching. And when I was asked about keys to profitability, I said, do not ignore your accounting. Well, there's a couple of different types of accounting that we can do. There's the historic accounting of, when we're creating our P&L or we're getting ready for taxes, we're looking at what did we actually spend, what was our income. What I'm going to talk about here is cost benefit analysis, because we do recommend that most people make some changes in management. And a lot of those changes in management are going to involve financial questions. So the profit equation is very simple. Already said it's income minus costs. So we can increase income by increasing the units of production, receiving a higher price per unit, adding enterprises. Those are the three basic ways in ranching that we can do this. In a grazing operation, within a fixed land base, we could, of course, go out and lease more land to increase the number of animals we're running or buy more land. But if we can take our existing land base, increase carrying capacity through changes in management, that is one of the key ways to increase income. And then, of course, throughout today, people have touched on, direct marketing as a way to increase the price per unit. In this exercise, we're going to focus on that increase in carrying capacity. We can also increase profit by reducing costs. And I think everybody knows and understands that we have two classifications of costs. We have the operating costs, which can be called variable or direct costs. We have overheads. Most economists call these fixed costs. In Ranching for Profit, I learned that they're overheads because they are not necessarily fixed. You change the business model and you can eliminate some overhead costs. So we're not going to call them fixed. Operating costs, as you increase the level of production, these are the costs that go up. And they're just listed out here. Everybody has seen these multiple times, I think, but something to consider. If we increase the carrying capacity of our property and we are running more head of livestock, variable costs are probably going to be increasing. Now, variable cost per head, it might be at a declining rate. Then we have the overheads, and these are costs that you incur whether you produce anything or not. And here's the standard listing of overheads. Sometimes we quibble about like this salaries and full-time labor. I think if you hire day labor to accomplish a particular task, that becomes a variable cost or an operating cost, but salaries and full-time labor are fixed costs. Equipment and facility depreciation are there. If part of your change in management involves an infrastructure development project, stock water, fence, you are going to incur some additional depreciation on those facilities. It's just the nature of the beast. So there are things we can do that might increase costs. There's things that we do that might decrease costs. We need to be able to figure out how these fit together. So just to make sure everybody understands what we're talking about, this is an outdated example based on the dollar amounts shown, but the relationship is the same today, basically the same today as what it was, 20 years ago when I first made this set of slides. So we got the Broken Hungry Ranch, and it says we have an overhead cost of $80,000. So whether we run 5 cows or 500 cows, That's the overhead. That floors everything. Now, in reality, it's probably it's like an increasing line, because as we increase stocking rate, typically we do increase some overheads. Variable costs do not start from zero. They start from the floor that the overhead increases. So right now we have a picture of what the costs on this ranch are. Because variable costs increase as we add more animals, that line is going up. You might see a very slight curve to it. That's the way it goes. Now we have some animals on the place. We're going to look at revenue flow, and this is really dated because this calf revenue is figured at $500 per cow. Whoa, calves are worth $1,500 now, but you know what? The overheads on this ranch is probably $200,000, and the operating costs per cow have probably gone up by 50 to 100%. That's why I said I haven't changed dollar values here to represent 2025 values. The relationship is what we're interested in. So with the current overhead and operating cost structure, 520 cows is the break-even herd size, just to cover costs. This land base is only capable of carrying 500 cows. So this is a money-losing business. Let's think about if we were able to reduce our overheads by 25%, so in this case, $20,000, by reducing the amount of equipment that we had, the break-even herd size drops from 520 to 420. We are now finally making a profit on this ranch. Well, how did we manage to get rid of 25% of our equipment or our overheads, 25% of our overheads, because we got rid of equipment? Yeah, we quit making and feeding hay, okay? We had 100 cows on this ranch just for the privilege of owning the equipment. That's not a good business model. All right, what if we were able to reduce our operating costs by $100 per cow, and we're doing this because we just cut our hay feeding season from 150 days down to 60 days because we changed our business model. Well, now our break-even herd size is down to 265 cows. This is starting to look pretty good. What if we were able to reduce overheads by 50%, variable costs by 100%? Look at the profitability picture here. On this fixed land resource where we had been in the previous business model losing money fully stocked, we now have 185 cows here that are cranking out profit for us. Is this pie in the sky nonsense to be able to reduce overheads by 50% and variable costs by $100? It is not. We have had a lot of clients over the years make these kind of changes, and even bigger changes, you know, than this, $200, $300, $400 reductions in operating costs per cow. It is built around changing the business model from dependency on iron and oil. You know what Burke and Wally talked about, just you start irrigating and you start making hay just as you're finishing feeding hay. You do that all summer, you finally get done making hay and you start feeding hay again. That business model does not work anymore because of that change in relationship between the value of our product, and which has deflated, and the excess inflation on our inputs. All right, so we say we're going to change management. These are the possible outcomes when we change management of the ranch. We might increase carrying capacity, or we might decrease it. We might improve individual animal performance, or we might reduce it. We might decrease operating costs. We might increase some. We'll decrease overheads, increase overheads. This is why you got to be able to do the accounting to figure out what is the likely outcome of making this change in management. And that's what that says. All right. So management intensive grazing, this is where we're doing time-based management, shorter grazing periods, appropriate recovery periods, all those things that normally I would be talking about at a webinar like that. So we're interested in, if we implement MIG, what's it going to do for us and what will it cost us to get there? So when we think about the benefits, first and foremost, the one that I have seen consistently over the years is increased pasture productivity. If you are a good manager, you should also expect improved animal performance. If you're a C grade, I wrote a column about a year ago about A grade grazers versus C grade grazers. A grade grazers will get improved individual animal performance. C grade grazers, they're going to up their stocking rate, but they're going to see a decrease in individual performance. Reduce wintering costs, less fertilizer use, and many other wonderful things. So these are the positives of what we hope to happen. Okay, now, what's the price we're going to pay? Probably further stock water development, additional fencing. In the eastern half of the country, certainly we may need to lime acidic soils or add nutrients. We might need to reseed a pasture. So these are all additional costs that we may incur because we've made a change in management. All right, we do expect to have increased productivity. Are you willing to make the necessary changes in your overall management in order to capture that increased productivity? Come on. All right. Now, there are certain management practices that have an ongoing benefit on your place for years and years and years. And that's what stock water development, to me, falls into that category. If you do it right, you're probably going to have 50 years of good service out of that system. But just reseeding a pasture probably has a limited lifetime. It's going to get better, stay there for a while, but then it might fade away again. So we need to be able to think in terms of, is this a long-term ongoing benefit, or is this something that's going to help me for a few years and then I got to redo something, and so on. And then we get into this question of, if we expect there to be a benefit, how much is it going to be? So how do you figure this out? You know, if you have done this before on one property and now you're going to do it on a nearby property, you're probably going to have a similar experience on the newer property. It might not be exactly the same, but it'll probably be similar. If you're trying to do this for the first time in your environment, is there somebody you know and trust, a neighbor who has done this successfully? Well, if they got a 35% increase in productivity, maybe you can expect to get that also. And then there's, you know, just the way, if you have nothing else to go from, you're probably going to wag it, and your likelihood of having a correct assessment has probably gone down. All right. So we have I developed this a number of years ago, used it, you know, it's one of the routine tools that I use, you know, in the consulting business, which, by the way, I keep saying that I consider myself 70% retired now. And so, no, I am not soliciting new consulting clients, but I am willing to, you know, share this tool as we go along, and other ones. All right. So we also have this question of how quickly, if we're going to make an investment how quickly do we want to get that paid back? All right. And, you might look at like the stock, water, and fence development and say, well, we're going to have a benefit for, the next 20 to 50 years. Expense it out over 20 to 50 years, and it'll look like a very good return on investment. But you do also have a cash flow issue that if you're going to do stuff, you got to pay for it. And so I would rarely look at anything longer than a 5-year payback on a project. More typically, we look at a 3-year deal, but I'm using this as a example. And so I'm projecting that from whatever our base level, what our current management is giving us, that if I do this improvement, I make this investment, that in the first year, I'm going to get a 20% increase in carrying capacity. And so this is all done on an animal unit day basis. So how many additional animal unit days will I gain? And this shows an incremental increase over 5 years. And even on a stock, water, and fence investment project, you're going to have to learn a different approach to management. So I'm saying that for 5 years, you're going to see an increasing level of improvement. And then maybe it's going to kind of flatten out at that 50%. And so we have whatever the base level was, and I believe this one, all right, 20% going to 32.16. I think this was a base level of productivity of 80 animal unit days per acre. So it's either in a productive environment or it's an irrigated situation. It isn't desert rangeland. And so the 20% increase gives us 32 additional animal unit days, 30%, 48, and so forth. So this is how we're projecting out what the benefit of additional carrying capacity is going to be. So what's it going to cost to do this? If we're reseeding a pasture, you have fertilizer, seed, equipment, labor. Those are all going into the added cost side of the cost benefit analysis. If we're doing stock water project, we might have to drill a well, put pump in, run pipelines, tanks, there's just a whole lot of stuff that goes into developing that water distribution system. And fence, and the note I have here is quality material versus doing it on the cheap. What I say about stock water and fence is if you buy quality material, install it properly, you are going to have years of low maintenance service out of it. If you do it with as cheap a material as possible, maintenance is going to start eating you up in a few years and you will not like it. Same thing, reseeding a pasture. I generally say seeding a pasture is something you should do once in your lifetime. With proper grazing management after that, it should be there. This idea that you have to replace a pasture every 5 to 7 years is based on lack of effective grazing management. Then the labor side of it, are you going to hire it done or are you going to do it yourself? And I remember being in Ireland many years ago, touring a farm, and a guy was showing us actually a piece of equipment that he had built. And I asked, what did it cost you to build that? And he said, it didn't cost me nothing. I done it myself. So don't think that it doesn't cost you anything if you do it yourself. You should set what is my time worth? What is an hour of my time worth? And however many hours you put into the project, that's what it costs you. If you hire a contract to do it, it's a little more cut and dried. They give you a bill for X number of dollars, and that's what it costs you. What will it cost to operate? Additional labor. If you make this change in management over the course of the year, is it saving you time or does it add more work to it? If it adds more work to it, can you get it done within the constraints of everything else you have to do? Will you have to hire someone to, go out there and move fences every day and have the more intensive management? These are assessments that you need to make up front and do it honestly. We do have the repair and maintenance, and the way we generally, well, I already talked about doing it on the cheap. The way we figure repair and maintenance is generally some percentage of the capital cost. And so that will be based on the original investment you make and the expected longevity that you expect out of that improvement. And remember, this talk will be available through the Ag Stewardship website, after the conference is over. So you can go through this stuff as many times as you want to do to think about it. All right. If you increase carrying capacity, you're going to have more livestock on the place. Either that, or you take the same number of livestock and graze them for more days. There is two avenues to capture that increased carrying capacity. But in a lot of situations, there's going to be more livestock on the place. Do you have the funds or the credit to allow you to add the animals necessary for capturing this additional carrying capacity? As you put more animals on the place, those operating or variable costs are going to increase for every additional animal. So more vet med costs, more salt and mineral, transporting them in and out, marketing costs, those costs will go up. This is where custom contract grazing can come in. And when we were on our farm in Missouri, and we started increasing the carrying capacity, that's when we got into custom grazing so that we could increase our stocking rate to harvest the greater amount of forage we were producing without having to make an investment in additional livestock. So maybe you've never done custom grazing before, but it does become a very useful tool if you are increasing the productivity of your ranch. Now we look at the possible cost savings. When I started the grazing research projects that I did in Missouri, it was all geared towards reducing hay feeding, increasing grazing deeper and deeper in the winter, and eventually we grazed through the entire winter. And so that was a major cost savings that going to MIG allowed us to do. By being able to maintain legumes in pastures rather than using nitrogen fertilizer, we completely eliminated fertilizer costs. Clipping, that's something done in the eastern half of the country. We could largely eliminate that. The frequency of reseeding, better animal husbandry by seeing them on a daily basis, reduced health costs, and believe it or not, Kansas State University, University of Nebraska, University of Missouri in the 1990s all did time and motion studies looking at labor requirements for livestock. And all three of those universities concluded that one employee could manage more livestock in a very intensive system than in an extensive system, and that the healthcare costs per head went down with the frequency of rotation because people were seeing the animals on a much more regular basis. And then if you can run 40% more animals on the ranch with the same labor, the same equipment, it will lower the overhead cost per animal unit. So those are potential cost savings. The expected return, because livestock prices run on a cycle, it makes a difference how fast a investment in fence and water pays off, whether you're on the top part of the cattle cycle or the bottom part of the cattle cycle. And part of the reason that I like doing the payback analysis on just a 3-year basis is I'm more confident in where the price will be 3 years from now than where it's going to be 5, 7, 10, 15 years from now. Different livestock products have different value. The greater the value of the livestock product that you are producing, the more you can afford to invest in infrastructure that allows a greater carrying capacity, because every additional animal you bring on should be increasing the revenue flow even more. And so we can invest more if we are in a direct marketing food business than if we're in just a commodity product business. This is the listing that I mentioned earlier about on a per acre basis. So on an animal unit basis per acre, what are the most profitable grazing enterprises? Top of the list is value-added dairy products, and then our pasture finished lamb, pasture finished beef, and it goes on down, and kind of the bottom of the list is commodity cow-calf. Now, where we are in the cattle cycle with the real high value of calves, that commodity cow-calf, may have moved up the list there somewhere. But this is kind of how it sorts out. And it just illustrates that principle that the closer you are to the end consumer of the product, generally the greater the profitability potential is going to be. And this now, we're going to look at how we figure the value of increased revenue. So if we increase carrying capacity, we expect that to add to the revenue flow. And if you look at the big worksheet that we do, we typically have 7 different livestock enterprises, cattle and sheep enterprises on that. I've consolidated it down to just 3, to show how we take different classes of livestock, convert them all to standard animal units, and then look at the revenue and calculate the increased revenue for each additional animal unit day that we are harvesting, and then the gross margin value for each of those enterprises. So we have cows, yearlings, ewes. We look at what their expected feed intake is going to be, go through the number of days they're on the ranch. So we have the total consumption by that class of animals on the property. And then we convert it to standard animal units, and that's based on the 1,000-pound cow as the standard animal unit. We have gross return per animal, the operating cost per animal, and of course, gross margin is value of our product minus the operating cost to get it. So the gross margin per animal line is here. We divide, we have gross return, so the gross revenue, we divide that by the animal unit days used to get us our increased revenue per animal unit day. And then to get increased added gross margin per animal unit, we take the gross margin per animal and divide it again by the AUDs used by that type of animal. And in this example, the growth, and the reason we look at gross margin here is that is what's going to be available to pay for the improvement that you've made. You don't have, just because we added $2.50 per AUD consumed by cow-calf pair, that doesn't mean we have $250 excuse me, $2.51 available to spend towards infrastructure. Because remember, by adding those other animals, we increase the amount of operating costs. So we have to pay for the operating costs on every additional animal. And then what's left over after that is what we potentially have available to pay for the infrastructure project that we did. And maybe we built a corral. We would figure it, all the same way. So it's really that bottom red line. This is what we have available to pay towards our infrastructure project. In this example, cow, calf, and yearlings aren't that different. Some years, depending on where we are in the cycle, and all the overvalued, undervaluing that Wally would talk about, sometimes we're going to get a better gross margin on yearlings. Sometimes it's going to be a better gross margin on cows. But if you take that cattle category, contrast it with the sheep there, and we've got, more than twice as much gross margin per AUD harvested by a sheep than we did for the cattle. So and this is going to be different for your different circumstances. But in this case, it tells me, oh, if I run sheep, I'm going to pay for that fence and water faster than if I'm running cattle. So that's what this type of analysis is telling you. It's showing you where do you have the greatest potential to increase the gross margin so you have money left over to pay for the infrastructure project. And then this one, so as I said, we're starting from a base yield of 50 animal unit days per acre. So in our current management, that's what our records say we have been harvesting. Going back to the table where for year one, I had projected a 20% increase, year two, 30%, and so forth up until in year 5, we had 5%. That gives us total additional animal unit days of 296. This is $1.20. That is the gross margin value that we earned. That came off of the previous table. So we take 296 additional animal unit days times $1.20 gross margin per animal unit day. We earned an additional $355 over the course of 5 years because we made this change in management that was facilitated by our investment in infrastructure, which was $160. That was the one-time upfront cost to do the stock water development and the additional fencing. I got a 4% interest charge on this over the course of 5 years. So basically, the annualized cost for this project, $36. We are charging 6% repair and maintenance charge against this $160 investment. That's just to take care of broken fence wire, broken float, failed pump, whatever. So we have about $10 a year additional repair and maintenance. And so if we subtract the total cost of the project from the additional gross margin value, we have $127 benefit over the cost of the project. So that's $1.56 return on each dollar we invested, or an 11% annualized return on investment. Think about where else you invest money, stock market, bonds, whatever. If you're happy with an 11% return on investment, that's a good choice to make. Had you not gone through this process, you would not have known whether or not that was a good choice or not. So this tool, and it's just basic Excel tool, any improvement practice that can be put on a per acre basis, this tool allows you to do the cost benefit analysis. In any of my spreadsheets, you've got black, red, and blue font cells. Blue font cells have to have ranch specific information. Blacks and reds are, calculations. So if you want to use this, you need to be able to fill in every blue font cell. And remember, accurate information in gives you accurate information out. Garbage in gives you garbage out. All right, so I got to get a book ad in here. So you can go to our website, American Grazing Land Services, buy the fence and water supplies and all those things, but you can get the books there also, along with, I sell several of Alan Nation's books, Steve Cody's stockmanship book, and other stuff like that. I guess I thought I had a contact information slide there. Jared is going to be sending out that, contact information for the speakers, but you can get in touch with me. All right. If you're interested in the cost benefit analyzer, you send me an email and I can send you the Excel file. If you do it quickly, you can get it for free, because one of the things I need to do is actually put a downloadable for a price file on our website. But right now, if you email me at jrgerrish@custertel.net, I will just send you the analyzer file. Okay.
That's perfect. Yeah, Margot just put that in the chat. So again, if you want that, so it's just an Excel file that they'll send over, and
Yep.
it is proprietary, but I guess it would be able to be used on your, probably used for your business, but not shared. I mean,
That's what I would hope for.
yeah. So if you download it, use it for your purposes, use it for your business. If you find somebody else that wants it, then help them contact Jim Gerrish and get it from him directly. Cool. Well, that's perfect, Jim. It's been great to have you part of this summit. We appreciate the expertise that you have. Let's hang on there for just a second. Let's see if Clay, are you there? We'll make
Yes,
this.
sir.
We'll make this transition. All right, you guys know each other, right?
Yeah, we do.
Yep.
Just a little bit. How many podcasts have you been on with Clay, Jim?
I don't know, 3 or 4, Jim. Is that?
I would say 3 or 4. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's let me see if we can do this. Let's pin you guys here. All right. Tell us what your favorite podcast is, and let's point them in that direction, Clay.
My favorite episode.
Favorite episode from Mr. Gerrish. Is there one that stands out?
After I'd been through the course that he did, we did one together that was pretty powerful. Let me look it up. I'll find the exact link right now.
Okay. Yeah, we can put that in the chat.
Yeah.
So Jim, as you are transitioning, if you get a hold of American Grazing Lands, I guess, is that still your son that's managing that side? And
Yeah,
the store and
product side of the business, our son Galen runs fence and stock water sales for forage seed. Don still does those projects.
Okay. Yep. And they're great. They ship. That's where I get our material from, just because you know what you're getting. And it's as long as electric fence has been out here in Nevada, there's not very many sources for it. So I just as soon order it from Jim as from Amazon, because you know you're going to get what you need. And Galen's really good when you got a question too. If you need to troubleshoot something, he's like, man, why isn't this working? It's pretty simple, Jared. You got to put in more ground rods. Like, okay, I'll do that.
That's a common answer.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you find it, Clay?
So I'll tell you guys, keep buying that stuff, because that's what feeds my grandkids.
There you go. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I'd say it's a tie. We did one on the four laws of ecology, and then we did one on introducing more and proper recovery. And those are both pretty high on the list. Those were kind of paradigm shifting for me.
Okay, very good.
Hey, thank you, Jim.
You bet. You're welcome.
Have a blessed day.